Welcome to the January 27th, 2021 edition of the Oak Grove Community Council regular business meeting. I will share my screen to get our presentation going. Actually, I want to share something different, so let's kick this off. Okay, so thanks everyone for joining us. Tonight our program is really focused around the county's housing strategies project, and we'll have some other updates and reports to go through tonight, but housing strategies is our main show. So the first thing I'll do is I'll ask our board of directors to introduce themselves, and starting with me, I'm Joseph Edge. I'm the chair, and I've been the chair since March of 2019. And I live in the River Forest neighborhood. Valerie, could you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Valerie Chapman, and I have been the vice chair for the same amount of time that Joseph has been the chair, I believe. And I live about a block away from the trolley trail on Evergreen.
Jan, could you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Jan Lindstrom. I've been the secretary for the last 2 years, and I live on Laurelwood, just below River Road.
Jane.
Oh, I'm Jane Civiletti. I'm the treasurer, and I have been so for the same amount of time as everyone else who has introduced themselves. And I live in the Fair Oaks neighborhood.
Jim.
Hi, I'm Jim Meyer. I've been a director at large for 4 years, and I live on the corner of Oak Grove Boulevard and River Forest Drive.
And Rich.
Hi, I'm Rich Nippon. I live about 3 blocks due south of Fred Meyer's, and I've been going to meetings since I moved here about 1.5 years ago. And I took somebody's unexpired term, and I'm up for appointment to the board as a general member next month. Thank you.
Thank you. So first things we'll do is our officer report. Jan, could you take it away?
I forgot Greg.
Greg Wennison, general member.
Greg.
I live on Oak Grove Boulevard between Fair Oaks and Laurie.
Good catch, guys. Sorry, Greg. I didn't mean to cut you short. Okay, now we'll do the officer reports. Jan, please take it away.
Hi, okay. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to report that I have spent most of this week updating minutes and posting them on the website today. So we do have 1 year of Oak Grove Community Council general meeting minutes. We also have links to all of the YouTube videos for where we didn't do minutes because we were recording the meetings. So I'm not quite finished with posting all of the board meeting minutes, but those will be up probably tonight, if not tomorrow, since those are taking a little more time. And let's see, what else did you want me to mention, Joseph? I'm taking attendance tonight, and I'm just, going through the list to make sure. I have to add tonight in to figure out everyone's voting record. So we're not voting tonight, we're voting in February, right? So we're not worried about that tonight.
Correct.
Yet. Okay, excellent. So I will have a full
Perfect.
report on attendance and current membership, and I think I should probably email it out, Joseph, so everyone will know when they go to the February meeting what their status is. I've thought about putting it up there, but in terms of a privacy issue, I think it'd be better just to send it up.
Okay. Thanks, Jen. Jane, could you give us the treasurer's update?
Yes, since our last meeting on December the 2nd, we had one outgoing check. This was a donation that was voted upon by the membership at that meeting to the Milwaukee Lions Club. It was in the amount of $500 toward their December food drive for the North Clackamas area. We've had no donations to the council's fund since September. So I'll just mention anyone who may be interested in putting any money into the council's fund can do so by dropping in at any On Point Community Credit Union, telling them you'd like to place some cash check, whatever, transfer of funds into the account of the Oak Lodge Community Council, and they should be able to accommodate that. Currently, our balance still remains at $1,712.38.
Jane, was the check, the donation to Good Roots Community for their food bank?
No, that was it was a check to the Milwaukee Lions Club, who was doing that, the food drive. They were doing a food drive and donation thing in December. The community council's donation to the Good Roots Food Bank was in April of 2020.
Thank you, Jane. So the next announcement is that we are required by our bylaws to announce the nominees for elections next month. The elections will be held on February 24th, and the current nominations from the nominating committee. Thank you, Eleanor Hunter, for leading that. The chair candidate is me, Joseph Edge. Vice chair candidate again is Valerie Chapman, and also treasurer candidate again is Jane Civiletti. We have an open slot for secretary this time because Jan Lindstrom will be transitioning to a director at large. Or she's a nominee for director at large, I should say. Rich Nippon will also be a nominee for director at large, as well as Mark Elliott. So we will give all of the nominees a chance to introduce themselves at our February meeting, but we wanted to make sure everyone knew who was up this time. So, thank you very much. With that, we are going to hand it off to our featured presenter, which is Martha Fritzie, a planner from Clackamas County. This is for the Housing Strategies Project. Martha, can you unmute yourself, and
Hi.
We'll set you up as a co-host so you can share your screen.
Thank you. Oops. Not there yet.
Valerie, are you able to help with that?
Nope.
You should be a
Oh, yes, thank you. Let's see. Slideshow. Okay. Well, hi, thank you for having me. I am Martha Fritzie. I'm a principal planner with the county's Planning and Zoning Division. I am also the project manager for our Land Use Housing Strategies project. And Joseph asked me to come talk to you about this project and provide a little bit of background about what it is and what we're doing and what we've done so far with phase one. Calling it phase one should be an indication that this is a much larger project than what we're going to talk about today. It is a complicated project with a lot of moving parts. It is related to housing and the need in the community, communities across the county to find places to provide for more housing. And so I'm going to be throwing potentially a lot of information at you today in a short time frame. I understand we have half an hour. Is that correct, Joseph? We have half an hour. Okay. I'm going to do my very best to keep my presentation as brief as possible, but it is a lot of information. And so at the end of this presentation, which I will send to Joseph after this meeting to forward on to you all. At the end of the presentation is a link to the Housing Strategies Project webpage, which has a ton of additional information and a lot more background information than I'm going to give you. It also has my email address. If anyone has any questions, you're welcome to email me directly, and I will do my very best to respond as quickly as possible. And there's also an email address on there for Ellen Rogelin, who is listening in today. If you want to be added to the interested parties list, contact Ellen. But if you have specific questions about the project, you should contact me. And so, why is it not advancing? There we go. First and foremost, why are we even doing this? And so I think we should all be aware at this point that housing is becoming less affordable, and there are a number of reasons for that. But there is a limited supply, and if it's not causing this issue, it's certainly exacerbating the issue. And so back in 2019, the Board of County Commissioners contracted with a consulting firm to complete a housing needs analysis for the county. And that analysis very generally looked at expected growth in population or households in various areas, looked at what their housing needs would be, and then looked at residential land that was available in the county or was vacant or partially vacant, could be developed with housing, and compared how much housing could be developed on that with how much housing would be needed, and found in the urban area and the unincorporated urban area of Clackamas County a need to find places to put up to 5,000 more housing units in the next 20 years. The need was pretty broad across the board. It was for all housing types and prices, although the greatest needs identified, not surprisingly, were for affordable housing, for housing affordable to those with low or very, very low incomes, and for multifamily housing. And so also in 2019, to start to address the housing crisis, the Board of County Commissioners put together a housing affordability and homelessness task force, which met a number of times throughout the year and generated a report with a lot of different recommendations for the county to consider to help alleviate some of the housing and homelessness problems. Now, a lot of those really relate to service provision and services, and those are things that another department, the Health, Housing and Human Services Department, are responsible for, and they are working on a lot of those those recommendations. But there were a number of recommendations that came out of that group that relate to zoning and land use, and so with this information, we started to put together this housing strategies project, which essentially the overarching purpose is to look at changes that could be made to our zoning code that could support the development of more housing and more affordable and more variety of housing in the urban unincorporated areas of the county. With the understanding that we look at zoning, we're not building housing. There's only so much that you can do through your zoning code, but there are certainly things that we can do. And so at about the same time in 2019, the legislature passed House Bill 2001, which some of you may be familiar with or have heard of, has to do with middle housing, with providing different housing types in, excuse me, in single family neighborhoods. That combined with the recommendations, some other legislation, and some recommendations that came from the community and other agencies that we put onto our long-range planning work program, all went into this housing strategies project. There were 12 potential strategies to look at changes in our zoning code to help address the housing problem that we were considering. And so we cannot possibly do 12 different things at the same time. And so we had to analyze these and look at recommend phasing based on how were they really going to produce a good number of new units, looking at the regulatory context, looking at how it could promote the equity goals of the county. All of this is wrapped together in an issue paper. Its long name is listed down here. It is available on the webpage that I'm going to post at the end, and it provides a lot of detail about each of these potential strategies that we looked at. The short version is we looked at them and we put them into sort of three main buckets, which turned into three phases, and we put strategies together that really tied together. The very first phase that we're going to talk about today, which is underway, really has to do with strategies that affect multifamily housing. And so you recall, maybe I talk really fast, that the housing needs analysis found the greatest need for multifamily housing. That's one of the reasons that this became a strategy that we're looking at first. Multifamily housing and the amount that you can build on a site is very directly tied to how much parking you have to provide, and to whether or not you can get more incentives, we can create more incentives for affordable housing. And so the three strategies that we're talking about in phase one is to consider increasing and removing maximum density requirements for multifamily developments in certain commercial zones. And when we say maximum density, our zoning code talks about dwelling units per acre. That's what density is how many dwelling units you are allowed to put on an acre of land. Along with that, we're looking at considering changing the parking standards for multifamily developments based on overall or specifically based on proximity to transit or dwelling unit affordability, and also considering how to provide an affordable housing bonus, which is generally tied to allowing more density or more units per acre for developers who are willing to provide units that are affordable to the lower income households. I know it seems strange that we are looking at these 4 commercial zoning districts, and I'll explain that in a little bit more detail in just a minute. But one of the reasons that we started with multifamily housing in commercial districts is partly due to the fact that we're looking for more places to enable multifamily housing to be built. But at the same time, in the housing needs analysis, it found that actually residential land zoned for high density housing is in very, very, very short supply. And so logically in our minds, there's a demand for multifamily housing. There's no supply in the residential lands. And the next most logical place that a developer would look to build multifamily units would be any other zones in the county where it's allowed. Well, it's commercial zones. Multifamily housing is currently allowed in commercial zones, in not all, but in most commercial zones. And so about that same time as we were thinking about this, we started actually hearing from developers who were wanting to develop in multifamily housing in commercial zones. And so it seemed like a good place to start as we were trying to encourage more development to actually happen. So we took all of this information to the board about a year ago. They told us to go forth and start with phase one. We started with doing a lot of research, trying to figure out what other jurisdictions did, what data was out there that might help lead us to some answers for our questions about parking and density and things like that. We put together a working group, which includes 16-ish members. It changes a little bit, some staff support. We've had 3 meetings with that group to discuss the phase one strategies. And this working group is made up of some representatives of the community, some architects and developers of affordable housing, a senior housing developer, some affordable housing advocates. We tried to bring a fairly broad range of views into the room to discuss these issues. We expect we'll have one more meeting in the coming months to discuss the potential code amendments related to these. We've also done a fair amount of outreach. There have been a number of press releases, social media. We had the webpage going. I gave a short presentation to the community leaders meeting, which includes all the CPO chairs last fall. And a lot of you may be aware that we had an online survey back in December and into January. And so kind of getting into the little bit more detail of what each of these strategies means. Currently the county zoning code does allow multifamily dwellings in a lot of our commercial zones. However, multifamily dwellings are limited to 25 units an acre in the commercial districts that we are looking at. Now, there are other commercial districts in the county that actually allow for more housing, and there are some that have no maximum. You could, in theory, build as many housing units as you could fit on the property. So we're not looking at those. We're looking at the zones that we generally find along our corridors, along McLaughlin, along 82nd, and I'll show you a map in just a moment. And those are our general commercial zones, quarter commercial, office commercial, and retail. And part of the issue is that if you were to develop, if somebody were to come in and develop a commercial building in these zones, there's really no height limitations, there's no floor area restrictions. You could pretty much, you know, if someone could come in and build a 6-story office building if they wanted to, and yet a comparable building for multifamily housing couldn't be built because of this 25 units an acre cap. And we heard from developers as they were coming in and showing interest that sites needed at least 50 to 60 units an acre in density and able to make the development financially feasible. And so there's a lot of factors that go into making a development financially feasible. But some of that has to do with being able to actually develop enough units to make it affordable, because units it's expensive to build. And so, you know, one thing to keep in mind, and that we were trying to keep in mind as we were thinking about this, because, you know, when I hear 50 or 60 units an acre, I go, wow, that sounds like a lot. You know, I don't know what 25 looks like. And so I started thinking about really what does that mean? And so we do have areas specifically over by Clackamas Town Center and over by the Fuller Road Max station that don't have a maximum density. And currently housing is being developed there at 40 to 48 units an acre. And that is generally about a 4-story building. If you think about, I think it's called Rosewood Commons or something like that. You can see it from I-205. It's right over by Fuller Road Station. It was recently built and it's up at the high end of in the 40s for units per acre. And so this is the map of the areas that we're talking about. Generally, these bright red areas are what we're talking about. So we're not talking about this. This is the area that doesn't have a maximum density. We're talking about these commercial zones that are found along these corridors. And again, recall they currently allow multifamily housing to be developed. It's just that if you were to develop that on the site, you would be capped at this 25 unit an acre ratio. And so this is the development that I was talking about over by Fuller Road Station area. It's just sort of your standard 4-story apartment building. This could not be built at 25 units an acre. This is probably 45, 46. And so as we were talking about this, and some of those of you who took the survey may remember looking at this picture, we're looking at developments that are more along the lines of like 3 to 5 stories of multifamily units. This one down here actually is 100 units an acre. And I put it on here because that's a number that seems really super shocking to me personally. But when you look at these developments, you realize we're not talking about, you know, high-rise development that you would see, for example, in, you know, in downtown Portland. We're talking about increasing density to allow developments that might look something like this. And so through the working group and through the survey, we talked about this. The actual strategy was consider removing or increasing maximum density in these commercial zoning districts. And I think that one thing that we have discovered, and staff agrees that there's general support among what we've heard so far on the folks who have participated to increase the density, and but not to just completely remove it. And that's understandable. There was concern among the working group about what kind of implications that would have for land prices, you know. And then I guess it's just generally a concern, because somebody could come in and do something that's much higher density if they can meet all of the other development standards. And so that's kind of where staff has landed, and what we're understanding and what we're moving forward with right now is considering increasing the maximum density, although a specific number is we have not landed on a specific number. And so as you're thinking about developing housing, I mean, there's a lot of different factors that go into the number of units that can actually be put on the ground, and that can actually be financially feasible. And one of those factors is parking. I mean, everything has to physically fit on the site. And so if you're required to have a lot of parking, you either have to use a lot of your site for parking and you can't develop units, or you have to build structured parking, which is very expensive. And so currently, if somebody were to come into the county to build multifamily units, build apartments or condos, they would be required, depending on how many bedrooms each of the units had, would be required to provide 1 1/4 to 1 3/4 parking spaces per unit. So in other words, if a development was proposed for 100 1-bedroom units, they would have to provide 125 parking spaces. There's actually no parking ratio for studio or 0-bedroom units in our zoning code, which is awkward and we'd like to address. And it doesn't matter what type or where the multifamily units are being developed, that's the parking ratio. And so currently the only way to try to change the ratio or get a reduced ratio that's a minimum. I suppose you could build more. But if you're trying to provide less, if you think that you don't need to provide as much, the only way to do it is a specific request to the Board of County Commissioners, which may or may not even be possible moving into the future. And so that's not really a practical way for developers to plan a project, and it certainly provides no certainty for them. And at the same time, through our research, data shows us that there really is a relationship between household income and vehicle ownership, particularly for the very low income households. And that proximity to light rail stations does reduce the need for parking. And these are based on, surveys of actual parking usage in parking lots. And so the consideration for changing the parking ratio can tie directly to the affordability of a unit or to the location or just in general, the parking ratio for any development. And so again, what we're talking about is sort of this subset of the urban area. These are all the zones that allow multifamily development. This is McLaughlin. Again, this is 82nd, Town Center, down, that's still 82nd, I suppose, on the highway. And so these are areas that would potentially be affected by a change in the required parking ratio. Parking is a difficult conversation. We knew that going into this, and our work has reiterated that, and we do understand that. I think generally through the working group does recognize that parking can affect the affordability of the development, and reducing parking ratios may be appropriate, at least in some circumstances. There have been a lot of conversations about the implications of providing too little parking, and where, that people still do have cars, and where would they park? It would be on-street parking, and how would that impact neighborhoods? And so through the survey, we also discovered that there is a lot of concern about reducing parking. And so this is a difficult conversation. There are a lot of considerations that go into it. And I think, one of the things that we need to keep in mind is that there really have been studies that show that certain development locations and or developments serving certain populations really actually don't need as much parking. And so there may be an opportunity to provide a way for developers to be able to obtain a lower parking ratio in certain circumstances that do not require them to go to the Board of County Commissioners every single time. And then finally, affordable housing bonuses is the last strategy. Affordable housing bonus, like I mentioned, is a program that a developer can take advantage of. A lot of zoning codes have them. We do have one in our zoning code where they would be allowed to build higher than that maximum density if they can ensure some of the units are available for lower income households. The county's bonus is very minimal. It's hardly ever used. It does not provide much incentive at all. And we have heard from affordable housing developers that it just doesn't provide any incentive to provide more housing. When we looked at other jurisdictions, indeed, there are other models that provide a lot more incentive, allowing up to even a 50% increase in density in some areas. And so that's something that we're looking at. The working group seems fairly supportive of looking at a different, different ways to incentivize affordable housing through bonuses. About half the survey respondents also were supportive of that. And so we are going to have some more conversations with affordable housing developers to really try to understand a little bit better what works, because we can look at other jurisdictions and see what they do, but it's really hard to tell what is the most effective way to do that. So that's the third strategy, which we're still working on. And so a couple of considerations as we're thinking about all of these strategies. I mean, maximum densities and parking are really closely tied together, as well as other development standards. They're all tied together, and market factors and other factors are tied together. All those things determine how many units can actually be put on the ground. And so just because there's no maximum density or a maximum density of 100 units an acre doesn't mean that every single development is going to be able to achieve that. May not mean any can achieve that if they're required to have structured parking. And so all of these things really work together. We also want to keep in the forefront of our mind, health outcomes and climate change and effects of having too many cars and driving have on those kinds of things. And we also need to keep in mind that there really is no single strategy that's going to solve our housing problem. And so this is phase one. We are looking at a small subset of our urban area. There's going to be phase two coming, and perhaps phase three. All of these strategies we're hoping are going to help move the needle, because we need to find places to provide more housing. So our anticipated schedule for phase one, we're looking to, I mentioned we're having another working group meeting. We haven't gotten that set yet. We're looking to schedule a work session with our planning commission and with our board of county commissioners to discuss where we are and the direction that we think we're moving with the code amendments, to increase the maximum density in commercial areas, to look at ways to provide a lower parking ratio, although in no instance are we going to recommend zero parking be provided with any of the developments, and then ways to create a better affordable housing bonus. And if we are told to go forth with those code amendments, we're looking at May and June for public hearings before the Planning Commission and the Board of County Commissioners to adopt any changes to our zoning code that would be effective shortly after that. And so that was a lot. This is the information about our website and our contact information. I actually have a few slides talking about phase two, but I also want to be conscientious of time and the fact that there may be some questions about phase one, and phase two is going to be happening for the next year-ish, and so there will be other opportunities for me to come back and talk about that if I need to. Do you want me to stop sharing while there's questions, or how do you want me to work this, Joe? So,
yeah, I think that makes sense.
okay.
Thanks, Martha. So do we have any, Valerie, I see your hand. We'll go ahead and let you kick it off with the questions.
Okay, well, that was a great presentation. So thank you, Martha. I'm excited to see the county moving forward with really providing housing. So my concern is maybe different, but I'm looking at housing in commercial zones and thinking about how housing for low-income people often ends up in the least desirable kinds of places for people. And wondering if there's a way to do zoning when you do housing so that there's a buffer around housing so that we don't just take affordable housing and slam it up next to, a busy highway like McLaughlin, and or the kinds of businesses that are not, they're not happy to be in a neighborhood with. How's that? Trying to think of a way to talk about that, and I think about some of the stretches on McLaughlin, or let me go back and say, I think about all the housing that's gone in Selwood, and whether people like it or not, people that live there have many things that they can walk to for services really easily. That is not true on McLaughlin. you have to walk long ways for groceries or to get a cup of coffee or anything else. So that's what I'm, friendly area for families. How are you thinking about that?
I meant to unmute, but I muted. So that is a really good question, and that's a difficult thing. In some ways, it's a bit of a chicken and egg. We want housing to be near commercial services and commercial goods and services that would serve the housing. We want those commercial goods and services near the housing so it can serve it. And right now, McLaughlin doesn't look like that. And quite frankly, neither does 82nd. And so there are development standards that require landscaping and setbacks, but there's really nothing that our zoning code can do about what is actually happening on the neighboring property in terms of what types of commercial businesses. I think I would throw out there also, which I didn't mention in the presentation, is that providing housing in commercial areas doesn't mean that you can't also provide commercial on the same site. And so mixed use development is something that we would like to see. It's allowed now and it would continue to be allowed along McLaughlin. And so I guess the hope is that we would have developers who could take advantage of the opportunity to provide something interesting on a site. We can't, through our zoning code, really require that, but we can certainly try to facilitate it.
Susan.
Hi, Martha. A lot has been said about affordable housing, and I'm just wondering what kind of prices are being discussed, whether it's rental or purchase of a condo, because before we've heard things called affordable housing, though they've been in the 350 to 400,000 range for homes, townhomes. So I'm wondering what kind of prices we're really talking about.
Well, we, through our zoning code, don't control prices, but generally when we're talking about affordable housing in terms of providing a bonus, it's housing that serves people with incomes at 60% of the area's median income or even less, or sometimes at 80% of the area's median income, depending on what housing types we're looking at. Other than that, the market would have to, if it's market rate, the market would have to dictate the pricing. But when we're talking about housing bonuses for affordable, it's housing that would be guaranteed to be affordable, either for rent or for sale. And it's guaranteed for a certain period of time, often through their funding sources, but it also would be a condition of getting the bonus.
Hi, this is Rose Soheda. I'm a affordable housing developer. Have worked in Portland and also now work for an organization that develops affordable housing throughout the state of Oregon. In terms of home ownership units, I mean, we're looking at about 250,000 to maybe 275K as what the range we'd love to see home ownership units, and that's condo units. And we get them to that level with a lot of subsidy. And then for rental housing, yes, that's correct. We typically use 60% of the median family income as the limit for the rental costs for affordable housing. And so, for example, a one-bedroom apartment at a 60% median family limit is just under $1,100 a month, I believe. So that still doesn't seem very affordable, does it? And so it's always a challenge, though, because developing affordable housing is very, very costly. But that's generally the range for both home ownership, for both condos and single family, and then also for rental family units.
Thank you for the information. I think there's some comments or questions in the chat also.
System development charges.
Yeah, I'll go up next and then we can look at those.
Okay.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I'll turn my volume up.
system development charges, from what I understand, if a developer builds a 4,000 square foot house, there's a certain amount of dollars charged for system development charges, and it runs into, I think, the tens of thousands or more. If, on the other hand, you build a 1,000 square foot house, 1/4 the size, the system development charges are the same. So as a developer, like I said, maybe the rules have changed, but as a developer, why would you build a smaller house when the system development charges are the same as building a larger house?
So that is a good question. And so the county has control over only transportation system development charges. The Parks District has control over the parks system development charges, and then sewer and water providers have control over those system development charges. And my understanding, and Jennifer Hughes, who is our planning director, can correct me if I'm wrong, is that the board did recently adopt a new structure for system development charges for single family homes that is based on size. And I don't know what those numbers are, but it's only a fraction of the total system development charges you're going to pay, to be honest. But we did do a study, and it's based on, the fact that smaller houses have fewer people and potentially impact the transportation system less. I don't know about the fees for those other agencies.
Thank you.
So we've just got a couple more minutes left. Valerie, did you have any of the questions in the chat that queued up to go?
I can pull open the chat.
Let me see.
Yeah.
I don't know where it starts.
Casey has raised his hand.
Okay.
I had a quick question.
Well, let's let Casey go first since he raised his hand, and we'll get to some of the questions in the chat after Janine goes.
Okay.
I just want to make sure we wrap up, with time to get to the rest of our business tonight. So thanks, everyone.
Hi, yeah, hopefully you can hear me. My question is around parking. Obviously, I know that's a big deal. I think that I'm sort of on board with reducing some of those parking rates. I guess my concern is the areas surrounding that. So maybe there's residential that's abutted next to commercial, and if there's sort of consideration of like parking and how to facilitate making sure that sort of overflow doesn't go into those residential areas, and maybe there's signage, or if that's sort of going simultaneously into, or the consideration of, when we talk about reducing parking in those areas, and then potentially seeing issues with that into the residential.
So currently signage or things like that are not something that we're considering. I think the way that we've been looking at it, at least at this point, is the reductions in the parking ratio would be based to some extent on the data that we've been provided that it's actually not needed and or used. And so the intent is not to create a lot of overflow parking into neighborhoods, but to create a development that's not overparked, and that could use that money and or space on the site to develop more units or more common area or something like that. Not to say that it would never happen, but I think we're looking at it at this point fairly conservatively as a start, because we don't want to create problems like that. And was there somebody else? I was reading through some of these comments, and I don't know how you want me to do this, Joseph. I think everybody can see the comments. It's not just me, right? Oh, one of them is to me. There's a question about waiving accessory dwelling unit fees to encourage density. And well, that's not something that's part of the phase 1 scope. And I also I don't know if that's something that would be under consideration. That's not something under the planning's purview in terms of the zoning code. And I don't know if you're talking about system development charges. If you are, again, what I know about that is the transportation system development charges does have a much lower rate for accessory dwelling units. But in the conversation with the board about changing the system development charges for transportation, it was not proposed to fully remove that rate at this point. And that's what I know about that. There's a comment in here from Rose: as an affordable housing developer, we need relief from the one-to-one parking ratios. And Rose, I think you were the one that gave us the rental and sales price information, so thank you. I think rental, condos, those questions were answered. What do communicable disease studies show about health outcomes on condensed housing you're planning for? That is a good question, and I do not feel like I can answer that question right now. I have seen studies that indicate density is not linked to increased disease communication, and I've seen studies that indicate that it is. And so I'm not an expert on that. That is certainly something that we can talk about and consider with our partners in the H3S department and see if there's any concerns there. And transit. Yes, and so we are working on a transit plan. I do not know a whole lot about the transit plan. There's definitely a link between transit and parking and affordable housing. You know, currently there's a project going on right around the Park Avenue station area that's considering some zoning code changes that are similar to what I'm talking about, and we're working in coordination with that project. There are definitely different transit options and opportunities in different areas, and so we are working with the group that's working on the transit plan, but we are certainly aware that there are transit issues, and there's not the same transit access for everybody. And
Martha, the other question that came in seemed to be around jobs, about jobs, whether you build this housing, is it close to jobs? How does that work for people? Is there an employer? If there's no jobs, why would people be out here?
Well, I mean, when we're talking about commercial districts, there are jobs. There's not a specific employer that we would be proposing to put housing near, or that a developer is proposing to put housing near. I think the idea is that putting housing near a light rail station, near potentially better transit opportunities, and to some extent near goods and services is helpful. I realize that along some of these corridors, some of those goods and services are not there now, and so I'm not sure what's going to come first, the housing or some of the commercial development, but they could go hand in hand. And I think there's an understanding also that people will still have cars. I mean, there still will be parking. There still will be people getting in their cars and going to the grocery store and going to their jobs, certainly. And then.
So just as a point of order, we're running way over our time now. I did say to Janine that she could ask a question, so I'd like to give her the final question if she's ready to ask.
Okay.
Janine,
yeah, I was just putting it in the comments, like, how has the pandemic affected the outcome of the study, or has it had any impact on the study? Because we don't know how long this is going on, and we don't know the impact, how jobs are going to change and all that kind of stuff. And yeah.
Well, it's certainly something that has been talked about. And I don't know the answer to that. I think you're right that jobs may change. And I guess on the one hand, it may be that more people are working at home and don't need to drive as much. And on the other hand, I mean, I don't know how it's going to change that. But it is something that we are keeping in the forefront of our minds as we're having these conversations. It's certainly changed our
Well, thank you,
public
Martha.
outreach efforts.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming and being with us tonight. We'll go ahead and grab the questions out of the chat transcript and relay those to you.
Okay.
And then we'll make sure that we continue to communicate about the opportunities to engage in this the work on this project and make sure that everybody knows when will be time to send comments to the Planning Commission and the board. So thank you so much. We really appreciate having you tonight.
Thanks for having me. Have a good night.
You too. Thank you. Now, really quickly, I think Jan had a question about an attendance question, and then we'll move on to Fred Sawyer.
Yeah, let me start my video so you don't have to look at my picture. There we go. Yes, a couple of attendance questions. I'm trying to identify who called in from the phone number 503-313-1863. If that person is still on.
I don't see them logged in anymore, Jan.
Really? Yeah, I don't know either, actually. Okay, and then we had, let me see, it's hard to see this version. Let me just go to the participants screen here. We have a Karen and a Kathy, and I want to make sure I get your last names. Is there a Kathy?
Yes, I see Kathy, but please unmute your microphone.
Okay, can you hear me? My name's Kathy Nidek.
Okay, how do you spell your last name? Is it N-Y?
No, N-A-J-D-E-K.
Okay, great. I do have you on the mailing list. I just didn't recognize your calling. Thank you so much, Kathy. And the other person was Karen. And I'm not sure which Karen that is because we have a few.
Karen Oberding.
Oh, gotcha. Thank you so much. I think that's it, Joseph.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. So now I'd like to turn it over to Fred Sawyer, who has an ask for us to send a letter of support regarding a safety project. So Fred, could you unmute your microphone and take it away?
Yes. Were you able to print out my motion and put it up for people to read?
I do have a condensed version that I can display here right now.
Okay. Well, I'll start out with an introduction. My name is Fred Sawyer. I retired from ODOT in 2006 after a career of 31 years with ODOT. For the last 12 years of my career, I did safety stuff. And one of the things we did every 2 years is to create safety projects. So this is, my proposal is pretty involved, but it tries to put together a number of things to make a safety project that would meet the criteria, meet a number of different criteria to be a successful safety projects. So so this is the basis of my motion, the first part of it. This is the main part of my motion. This was triggered kind of by the fatality that we had in November down at Boardman. I worked at ODOT, got my new job doing the safety stuff just after the current pet islands were put in McLaughlin. While these pet islands maybe reduce the rate of fatal and injury accidents, maybe up to a half, that's still not good enough. We can do better. The two islands down in Jennings Lodge are going to get rapid flashing beacons this summer. So, and we need an outpouring of support because we're kind of a month late in the beginnings of ODOT processes, so somebody will have to take an extra effort to make this happen. But so I guess it's a good time for questions. Okay.
Fred, what is an RRFB?
Oh, rectangular rapid flashing beacon. That's what is common. That's the new technology that you see at pet islands on 82nd and elsewhere. It's kind of a new thing that's been coming in the last 10 years or so.
That's like what we have at River Road at Roseville. Is that correct, Fred?
Yes. Oh, the other thing I'd like to say, pet islands at intersections are difficult. There's too many turning moments, and they're kind of problematic. A mid-block is better, and they can be wider. They can be wider and is better. They can be wider. They can take up most of the center median, like we have in front of the library, Oak Lodge Library.
Fred, has anybody talked to the people that use the bus stops we're talking about combining?
No, I guess I haven't. But that's to get away from, we've known for years that we wanted a pet island in front of Fred Meyer's gas station and the Bomber. There's nothing there. There's a bus stop. So we've known for years we want that. That's been, and last year, during the Get Moving 2020 process, they proposed bus rapid transit along McLaughlin, and typically when you get bus rapid transit, you reduce the number of crossings, and TriMet standard for bus stops is 780 feet apart, and all these stops are too close together now for that standard.
Eleanor, I see your hand is raised.
Hey, Fred, I want to thank you so much for all the work that you do on this.
Who was this? Who thanked me? I don't know. I missed it.
Oh, it was Eleanor, but she got muted again.
Okay.
Sorry about that. So Fred, my question is this. I'm totally with you in terms of safety, and I love you being a champion for safety. And I'm wondering how this proposal of yours connects with this idea of more housing, you know, probably in the next 5 years along McLaughlin Boulevard, because part of the safety is people crossing the street. Any of us who live here who have tried to cross McLaughlin Boulevard, not at a light, we take our lives in our hands. So my concern is, how does this connect with the increase in anticipated population along the boulevard as well? Does that make sense?
Yes, in my mind, the best one is from the Bomber, the trailer court, and the Fred Meyer gas station, where it's an awful long ways between Park Avenue and Courtney, and there is no safe crossing, special lanes in between there. So that takes care of a lot of people that live there now. You may or may not be aware of, but the back of the Bomber are a whole bunch of apartments. And right next to it is the RV trailer mobile home court. So there's a lot of people living there that need to cross the street. And we had a fatality several years ago there. So that's, and some of the crossing at Silverleaf to me is a nasty place. To combine that with one at mid-block between the Risley, between the Granite Tabletop Place and the Grove, makes a lot of sense to me. So, and this is just to give a good idea to ODOT what we think is a good idea. And if this is funded, it'll go through a multi-year process of refinement.
Mark?
So first of all, I want to reiterate Eleanor's expression of appreciation to you, Fred. I mean, you've clearly put a lot of thought into this, and I think that says a lot about you and your commitment to the community. I guess where I would suggest, I mean, these are pretty specific solutions, and I wonder if we wouldn't be better off saying exactly what you just said, like that there's a lot of, challenge areas associated with the area around the Bomber and around Silverleaf, and identify the problems rather than the solutions, and let the current professionals at ODOT really figure out the best comprehensive solution for this collection of areas. And really, to me, what we ought to advocate is making this whole corridor between, the Bomber, Fred Meyer's, Silverleaf, and Risley, to address that whole area with a comprehensive set of solutions, including things like pet islands, but let them figure out the combination of the right solutions to be able to address the collective needs, rather than give them a set of specific solutions.
When I was at ODOT, we struggled trying to figure out what to do. Throughout my career, 12 years, we looked at, and I looked at, and we all looked at, trying to figure out what we could do, and we didn't figure it out. I didn't figure it out. So,
okay, super.
Solution is,
just an observation. Thank you.
Anyway, so.
Thanks, Mark. Jane has a question, and then Rich.
And Fred, I was wondering about these RRFBs. They would be on McLaughlin Boulevard to stop traffic on a 5-lane highway.
Yep.
And is that something that has been done in other places and works relatively well?
82nd and the Bend Parkway both have these things.
I see. Okay, I'm familiar with the one on River Road. It's just a 2-lane street. And I'm also very familiar with crossing McLaughlin Boulevard in all sorts of light and weather, since I did take the bus for approximately 30 years to downtown. And I would personally be very concerned with my safety if I were to trust one of those devices to cross me across a 5-lane street. Sounds scary. Thank you.
Rich, can you unmute yourself?
Yes. Okay. First of all, I agree with what Mark said. He said a lot of what I was thinking. My observation would be, Fred, how quickly are you looking for something like this? I'd sooner have time to consider the pros and cons, have people make presentations, rather than just take it up. I mean, at a glance, it looks like, well, yeah, this makes sense, but there's always more to the details than meets the eye. How quickly are you looking, or do you need movement in this?
I need movement now. We're already late for this, at the beginning of this 2-year process. It's a year or 2 process to get online for a project 4 or 5 years out at a minimum. So
could we approach it the way Mark suggested, that offering the problem rather than the solution? And then you can offer the solution privately?
I think we should offer the solution. They say, no, that's not good. We have something better. I did this for 12 years and we never figured it out, and it hasn't changed. So, and if we don't put, and we haven't, and there, so that's my.
I'll just jump in really quick to throw some support behind what Fred is saying. That in my experience, it's better to offer some type of an idea, a concept for a solution, rather than to just issue a problem statement. At least it gives them something along to what we're thinking about. It gives them something to start from, and tends to help get things maybe moving a little bit easier. Now I see Eleanor has her hand up, and then we need to wrap up. Eleanor, please unmute. Thank you.
So I'd like to make a motion that the Oak Grove Community Council support this presentation, this idea, the solution, if you will, of Fred's, based on his years at ODOT, his understanding of this stuff. And as Fred said, when this proposal, if a proposal is submitted to ODOT, that it goes through their whole process. It's not as if, hi, here's a solution and we expect them to build what Fred is saying, but it's here, he's really looked at it, here's this idea, and then it'll go through the ODOT process. Fred, I appreciate the time. You've been talking about the timing to get this in sync with things. And I present a motion, I'm making a motion to support your presentation.
As proposed, is that correct, Eleanor?
Sure, as proposed.
I would second it.
Okay.
Who seconded?
Was that Jane?
Valerie.
Oh, Valerie seconded. Thank you, Valerie. Is there any further discussion on the question? Okay, I'm going to stop the share for a moment, and what we're going to do is ask everybody to, let's see, there we go, I need to see everybody. So voting members only. The voting, anybody voting no, please raise your hand. And again, this is voting members only. Is anybody, any voting members choosing to abstain? Susan, we have Susan and Casey are abstentions. And then Jan, do we have a tally of voting members present? I should have asked that first.
The number?
Yes.
Yes, hold on 1 second. What is required for a quorum, Joseph?
25.
25.
If it's under
25.
under 25, then we need to do a roll
Total.
call.
Okay, we do have over 25.
Excellent.
Voting members.
Yes.
Okay, then if we recorded the 2 abstentions and the 0 no votes, then everybody else is in favor.
Great.
Thanks a lot, Fred. I really appreciate that. I'm glad we were able to get this taken care of for you, and I'll work with Valerie to make and check in with you to make sure we get the letter in place. Fred, did you have another comment?
I have a motion, a different subject, on a newest county commissioner, Mark Scholl. I move we support the county commissioner's unanimous vote asking him to resign.
I second it.
I agree wholeheartedly. Thank you, Fred.
Any further discussion on the motion to support the Board of County Commissioners in their request that Commissioner Stoll resign? Okay, so we will do the same thing. Voting members only. Anybody voting no? Anybody abstaining?
Joseph, sorry,
What?
I didn't get my
Sutelma.
taken off. I'm voting no. I'm
Sutelma's a
voting.
no. New Bloom's iPhone. I don't know who.
Linda.
I don't know who you are by your New Bloom name. Oh, Linda. Okay. You are. You can unmute. Or I'm sorry. Was this a abstention or a no?
I'm on the fence between the two of them. I don't know if there's enough information. I don't know if it's our position. So at this point, I can't support it just because I'm not sure. I don't have enough facts to know.
And that's a
So,
no.
Do you want to vote no?
Sure.
Okay. So there's a no from Thelma and a no from Linda. Okay. Now, any abstentions? None. So all else are in favor. Motion passes. And I'm going to go back to sharing my screen because I'm losing my place here. Thanks, Fred. We'll get that taken care of as well. So just really quickly, Jan, is there any update on the Concord property?
Oh, yes, there is. Hold on. Can you come back to me because I don't have that open on my screen here. We'll just
Okay, no worries. So I'll give the Map It update really quick. The Map It officer elections are at their next meeting, and so nominations came in just last week, and it looks like Ed Gronke is the nominee for chair, and our own Fred Sawyer is nominee for vice chair. So I'm looking forward to supporting you with that, Fred. Valerie, did you have any updates on Park Avenue before we
I would just
move
say
on?
the Park Avenue project is moving forward. As we said in December that we presented to the Board of County Commissioners, and they moved it on to the Planning Commission. And so we did a presentation to the Planning Commission on the 11th of January. And the other piece that's coming out of both the meeting with the Board of County Commissioners and the Planning Board is that the county commissioners are planning to meet with the business and property owners in the area, and that will be coming up on February 17th. And this is a project that's moving forward. So the next phase after that will be public comment. So there'll be plenty of time for people to give updates or give their information about the project as they go forward. But it's the meeting with the property owners and businesses on the 17th, I think, of February. That is the next activity that's going on.
Okay, thank you, Valerie. Jan, did you want to give an update?
Yes.
On Concord?
Yes, they, we just got a message today from Catherine Krieger at the county, who is heading up the task force. And they were happy to report that on January 14th, the BCC approved the plan as submitted. So that was option 2, and that was the one that the task force liked the most and that the community liked the most when the survey results came in. So that was approved on January 14th. They are now working with OPSIS, which is the architecture firm, to create a scope of work for schematic design through permitting in May 2022. And they're expecting that this will be done in the next couple of weeks, and then that will also need to be approved by the BCC. And because there are 2 new board members, they are a little more on edge with getting some of these approvals through. So hopefully there will not be any change of point of view. Let's see if there's anything else here that I was gonna, okay. Task force meetings are gonna resume in March, but we don't have a specific date yet, but we will let everyone know, either at the meeting, next meeting, or via newsletter, or both. And that's it.
Awesome, thanks, Jan.
You're welcome.
Okay, and then really briefly, we're just going to show that there's several current recruitments open for advisory boards and commissions. The Clackamas Workforce Partnership closes before the end of the month, and then the Public Health Advisory Council closes the first of the month, and the rest are open for a little bit longer, and we'll send these out in our follow-up newsletter. So we'll just move on ahead. Are there any announcements from the floor? You can use the raise hand feature in Zoom or wave at the camera, and we'll see if I notice you. It doesn't look, oh, Fred said, I see you, Fred. Thanks, Callie.
You're muted,
You'll
Fred.
need to unmute, Fred.
You made the paper today in my view from Elvis Clark and Kathy Najak about the Governor's Project. It says Governor's Project isn't grassroots. I guess I don't know Kathy, but I do know most of the members who are in the put forth the Governor's Project, and they'll primarily long-standing active community members doing good work or did good work in the past. Eleanor used to do a lot more work when she was head of our organization. Joseph's doing that now. Nathan used to be on the MAPA board. Let's see. So every member, most of the members who have been in the paper have been longtime activists, and I wonder if Kathy even knows who these people are. Okay.
Are you asking me to respond?
Thanks, Fred.
Are
No,
you asking
these
me to
are just announcements
respond?
from the floor. No, these are just announcements from the floor. It's not really a dialogue session.
Oh.
So we're
You
asking our
just
members to
kind of
make
insulted
announcements from
me,
the
so
floor.
I thought I would have a moment to say something, but that's fine.
Sorry, this isn't really a forum for trying to have a debate. This is really just an opportunity for members to announce. So were there any other announcements from the floor? Okay, so thanks everybody. One of the things that we are trying to do this time is to, well, let me put up the next meeting date. Oops. And that crashed on me, so never mind. Our our schedule review is that our next meeting is February 24th, board meeting is February 1st. And then what we wanted to do tonight, we ran a little over, but what we wanted to do is to kind of leave everything open to just have, you know, a hangout session where everyone could, you know, feel free to stick around and chat with each other and, you know, and really have the opportunity for just to catch up with each other, because we would normally have these opportunities before and after our meetings when we would meet in person. So, you know, it's, you know, we wanted to try to recreate, you know, that opportunity for everybody. So, Valerie, did you want to add anything before we stop recording and say that this is our meeting?
No, I think that's it. I know that there's quite a number of people, so if a lot of people stick around and want to talk, it's also possible if people just want to socialize. I think I could divide people into some smaller groups if we wanted to do that. I would not be able to control who went into what group at this point. That would be way behind above my technology capability to happen in a couple of minutes, but I could put you in smaller groups, in 2 or 3 of them.
Okay, well, thanks everybody. We're going to call that a show. We're going to stop recording, and then this is just an open session for everyone. I don't have any games planned or anything